What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Integrative You Radio. You have Dr. Nicole here. I am flying solo today because I wanted to give you just a short, sweet, and high level conversation about some of the root causes associated with your pet's health issues. And the primary catalyst to talking about this is we work with a lot of families, and naturally, we get into conversations not just about the children of the family, but also the pets of the family. And this usually stems from not getting answers inside of, conventional veterinarian medicine. And there's been a lot of extremes lately. My parents actually are two people that came to me asking for help with their own dog, and then a multitude of our concierge medicine clients. And reason being is because it went from, hey, there's this benign issue, paw licking, chronic ear infections, irritation of the eye or eyes, and now it resulted in medication. It resulted in a stronger medication, and now it is resulting in the recommendation of extremely invasive and intense surgical procedures. Example is my parents were recommended to remove the left eye of their dog. That it was there's been quite a few of these situations where it's, 0 to 100 of what we're doing isn't working. We don't really know what the root cause is, but we're running out of our options based off of our toolbox, aka the conventional medical system. And we've run out of our toolbox of medications. So now the only other option is going to be surgery, but to the extent of surgical removal of an organ. And so obviously, this is not something that many pet owners want to embark on because it doesn't guarantee quality of life. It doesn't even guarantee that the entire problem will be resolved. How do we know it's not going to move to the other eye? And now we're going to have a pet that has no eyes. So the main thing that I wanted to bring to people's attention is obviously the way our brains work and our experience that we've had in working with humans. We have two dogs. We have two Vizslas who, if you know anything about Vizslas, they're extremely high maintenance and they're very sensitive. So there's definitely been different health things that we've navigated with our dogs, but we have primarily been in charge of their care because what we do for humans applies 100% to animals as well. There's no reason why we wouldn't use the same diagnostic testing in order to figure out the root cause and then use the appropriate tools that can range from supplements or red light therapy to homeopathy to even infrared sauna. We've done the same types of therapies on our dogs when needed, and we do feel like it has been a huge catalyst to their great health. But also the fact that, if you were to see our one dog who is now 12 years old, most people mistaken him for a puppy. And it's not really just his looks, it's how energetic he is and how agile he is, his endurance. He's running around on a trail or at the beach, he's running around the way puppies are. So, it's not necessarily just about looking a certain way, it's also about the other aspects that make up great health. So overall, that's kind of the background of our experience with dogs was treating our own and then intermittently helping our clients with their dogs as well, especially when it got to a point that they went as far as they could in the conventional model. But there was something very, very interesting that I observed, which of course took me down my research rabbit hole many years ago. So we mopped the floors in our house and our dog ran through, and of course you're like, oh, come on. But in that moment, what I realized is that the paw prints that I saw on the floor were not, it wasn't dirt, it wasn't mud, it wasn't that. What I was seeing was the fact that where the paws hit the floor, it was completely dry. And in that moment, I realized, wow, the paws of these dogs, cats, and other animals are extremely absorbent. So let's research this and learn more about it. And they are. So if you think about, the terrain of what we're all living in, especially if we're living in the US or we're living in cities or we're living in highly concentrated areas, there is known toxicity to the ground. And part of the toxicity of the ground is due to the different chemicals that people are using on their properties for landscaping purposes, fertilizing purposes. When you think of people that live in close proximity to golf courses, that live close proximity to farms, that live close proximity to dry cleaners, that live close proximity to factories or nuclear power plants. I've lived close to almost all of those things, with the exception of farms, living in New Jersey. And, from living in North Jersey, you're going to be in close proximity to different power plants, to different places where they have the tanks that house gasoline and petroleum. And then, moving down to the Jersey Shore area, there were many, many golf courses that were, spread throughout Monmouth County, Ocean County. And you get where I'm going with this. So, the other aspect is you're like, I don't live near any of those things. Fantastic. But you might be conscious enough to say, I'm not going to put a bunch of pesticides and herbicides and fertilizers and chemicals on my lawn or in my backyard, but maybe your neighbor is. And when you get into the compounds of these different insecticides, pesticides, especially things that are combating specific pests like bees or rodents. Some of them are powder form, and powder is going to spread through wind. We also see sprays. There's a lot of sprays that are happening for mosquito protection. And listen, I lived in South Carolina where it is extremely humid and mosquitoes are brutal. So anyone and everyone is getting mosquito treatment for their properties. And even though that I didn't, that my property was still contaminated with the same chemicals. It was still in the air, it was in the ground, it was on the trees, etc. So the moral of the story is that you have these dogs. I'm speaking to dogs very specifically because obviously this has been the bulk of our experience. But in addition to that is cats you're not always taking outside. Other pets you're not always taking outside. Dogs are they usually travel with you. You take them outside, you go for walks, etc. So it's a little bit different of a dynamic. So you have these dogs that have, very absorbent paws. Humans, dogs, our skin is extremely absorbent as well. And they're walking through the neighborhood, or you're taking them to, specific parks or specific areas, and they are absorbing a huge load of these different chemicals that are in the environment. And then, if it's going into the paws, they might start licking the paws. So that means those chemicals are going into the saliva. They're also going to get up, it's going to have an uptake into the blood vessels that are of the mouth and also into the glands. Then we also have them scratching their eyes and their ears. And so now we have the chemicals spreading into the eye, we have the chemicals spreading even into the ears, which is then going to create an abundance of microorganisms. Because what a lot of people don't realize is that fungus, bacteria, these overgrowths are usually a protective mechanism in order to protect against toxins. So, in the event when I work with humans, and if you've listened to other podcasts, when we see women who have chronic vaginal infections, if it's yeast infections or bacterial vaginosis, most of the time those infections are actually correlated to the different toxins that are in the vaginal canal from the use of tampons, condoms, lubricants, pads. And that's the root of the issue. So, this is one of the reasons why women end up working with us because they've done the antibiotics, they've done the monostat, they've done the antifungal creams, they've done the nystatin, they've done all of it, and nothing is working. And so now it's a matter of taking a deeper dive and looking at what are the other options, what are the other possible root causes. And so the same principle applies to animals, is that fungus has an opportunity to grow and spread as a result of toxic load, but at the same time, there is actually a protective mechanism associated with it. So the fungus will serve its purpose. So this is one of the reasons why if you try to fight the fungus and use different drugs, creams, etc., it keeps coming back because your body actually needs it to protect itself against the toxin, which is more harmful. And so listen, I we had our oldest dog had chronic ear infections, and part of the catalyst to those chronic ear infections was he was diagnosed with quote unquote parvo, even though parvo is a virus. This was a very, very, very long time ago, by the way. He was a puppy. We didn't know what we know now. He was diagnosed with parvo. Even though it was a virus, they still wanted to treat him with antibiotics and antifungals. They said, oh, he could die. We need to keep him hydrated. So he stayed overnight in an animal hospital. We went and picked him up the next day, and he had black tar, like ear mites in his ears. And it was just a chronic issue from there. And so, were we living? We were living in a very specific area where the neighborhood was 100% keeping up with the Joneses when it came to the lawn, your landscaping. We would joke because if we ever tried to work from home, we really couldn't because there was constantly mowers and weed whackers going because there was always landscapers on the block. It was almost like they just went from house to house and then they would start over. And so there were tons and tons of chemical exposures, in addition to the fact that there was a series of medications that altered the microbiome for our dog. And so at the time, we weren't treating him for toxicity, we were treating him for um, bacterial issues and fungal issues, and we weren't getting anywhere. And this went on for a very, very long time. So, the thing is that we need to understand this connection so that we can be more empowered in the health of our families, in the health of our pets, because it's the same. We're not the way the human makeup and what the human body needs and doesn't need is actually not much different from dogs. And I think it's actually comical. We were talking about this the other day because we were giving the dogs something off of the table, quote unquote table food. And I was like, these dogs, our dogs, have eaten solely people food, table food. We have cooked for them since they were puppies. And part of it was that experience that we had with the parvo, and then that messed up his gut, messed up his ears, messed up his microbiome, and that was our first dog. So then our second dog, we completely skipped dog food. We just went right to people food. And I was like, our dogs are in great shape. They don't have the typical ailments of a Vizsla, which are large growths, fatty deposit growths, skin issues, extreme graying at an early age, arthritis. A lot of Vizslas die pretty early. And, like I said, our dog is 12 and people consistently think that he is 3 to 4 years old. So there really isn't a huge difference. So, the way that we're being told to treat our dogs is, they should be eating this brown dehydrated kibble that has no nutrients in it. This is the best thing for them. Not true. They need tons and tons and tons of shots, which the fact that they even have shots for Lyme disease now makes no fucking sense. That's a whole different topic in itself. But the put the heartworm lotion on their spine, let those chemicals go directly into the spinal cord nervous system, make them wear chemical oriented collars in order to protect them from ticks. Like less is more, people. I know that what I'm saying is extremely controversial and everybody needs to make their own decisions and what they're comfortable with, but we have been fed so much bullshit as to, all the ways that we need to protect our dogs, protect our families, which is actually all driven in fear. And it's all driven by really bad science that is really just resulting in for-profit companies to make more money through the different shots, the treatments, the medications, the tick collars, the this, the that. But if you want to zoom out and, take away the emotions you might be feeling about what I'm saying, look at most dogs. They're not healthy. They are, they're classified as, extremely old and getting close to death by age 10 nowadays. Dogs used to live until 16, 17, 18 years old. That's not a thing anymore. And there are so many dogs on Xanax. There are dogs on human prescriptions, lifestyle prescriptions. And so we really need to understand that whatever, your thought process is that pets are not, they're not healthy. So what is the thing that's in your control that you can possibly change at this point? Is it the food? Is it the fact that you give them tap water? And tap water in well, all over the US and most other parts of the world is completely contaminated and toxic. And then we're wondering why they have all of these different issues. We have dogs having cancer constantly and again going through brutal treatments, chemotherapies and surgical removal of organs, limbs, etc. And, we have to think about like, how did we get here? Why are our animals so sick? Interesting fact that is totally like foreign in the US. We live in Italy now, and we never fixed our dogs. They're boys. We never um had their balls removed. And people thought we were crazy. I remember, lived in South Carolina where the dogs can run free in the mornings on the beach, and people were, oh my gosh, like your dog is not fixed. When are you fixing him? I'm not. Like I'm not, because, one is it's not proven that this is beneficial for the dog. And two, in the experience that we had, knowing other Vizsla owners that did do it, one, create the dog had cancer very close after. And then the other one, the dog became so aggressive that he actually couldn't take the dog out anymore. It was aggressive to dogs and humans. And I was like, I'll take my chances of not having that experience. Come to Italy, they don't do that here. They're like, look at you. The idea of it, they're like, why would you do that? And so, it's interesting because we think that we're so dictated by our environment. And so, we do things even if we're like, this doesn't make sense, or I don't necessarily want to do it, but we're going to do it because it's the norm of our environment. And I just, because of the knowledge that I had, I said no, and then had to always explain myself as to why. And then I come and I move to another place where if they were fixed, it would be a bizarre idea to this culture. And the idea of feeding your dogs kibble, canned food or dry food is also a foreign concept here. Like people are like, why would you do that? So, don't normalize things just because your environment tells you that this is the norm, because there are plenty of other parts of the world where it is completely not the norm. All right, so I'm going to give you a quick recap here. One, if your dog has reoccurring eye issues, ear issues, paw issues, there is a probability that there is a fungal issue, probably more than a bacterial issue, but it's not the root cause. The root cause is the toxins that are being absorbed by the paws, by the skin, and then spreading to the ears and eyes and mouth based off of scratching and cleaning. And this is more than likely resulting from environmental things that they're being exposed to. And it could be your property, it could be the walk you take them on, and it could be, the chemicals coming from your neighbor's property that are unfortunately contaminating yours. So, this isn't to live in a bubble. This isn't to create a ton of stress. This is for you to be empowered. What can I do? You could put little booties on your dog. You can do a little bentonite clay bath for your dog's paws. And then you can also use different binders, activated charcoal, bentonite clay. There's a lot of different options nowadays that you can put into your dog's food or water on a regular basis to bind the toxins that they're being exposed to. This is something I highly recommend for humans as well. And in addition to that is please, 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 please get multiple opinions. Do not go to your conventionally trained vet who says the eye has to come out, the leg has to go, we got to rip all your dog's teeth out because there's gum disease. Like these, one, things are never that black and white. Very rarely is it to that extreme of what's needed. And then also, there are a million other tools that are outside of the toolbox of the conventional veterinary system. There are herbs, there are homeopathics. I think homeopathy is one of the absolute best things for dogs. So, working with a classical homeopath to help you. We have had crazy shit happen with our dogs. We had to get an additional rabies shot in order for our dogs to come here to Italy. And literally, our one dog ended up with rabies. And we used a series of homeopathy in order to neutralize the effect on the dog. And, it was just like magical how quickly it worked. But, these, we're just very fortunate that we have these tools and we also have these people in our direct network. So it will take a little bit of work for you to build this new network. But I know a lot of our listeners are in the New York, New Jersey area, and there are a lot of holistic vets. I'll make sure that in our show notes, we can give you some of those resources, but Colts Neck Veterinary Hospital. That she is actually a vet that studied here in Italy, and she has homeopathy and she has acupuncture and chiropractic and herbs and a variety of things in her practice. She is someone that, if we're ever back in the States, we will use regularly for our dogs. So again, it's just a matter of looking and finding some other options and not rushing based off of fear into surgical procedures that are actually not going to fix the problem altogether. All right, guys, I hope this was helpful and we'll see you next time.